I wanted to just talk a little bit more about pain, and then we're going to finish with reification, with that exact question. So there's two ways, specific ways that you can work with pain that I wanted to share, because one is very, very profound. And I just definitely wanted to leave you with this. And again, it comes out of the Lojong tradition. Lojong comes out of 14th century Tibet. And it's a very beautiful tradition. It was kept secret for a very long time. And then it was brought into open teachings by a Lama in the 16th century. And so that's where we get a lot of our Lojong teachings. So here's how to work with pain from a Lojong perspective. And this will sound familiar to you in a Christian context. But let's say I'm dealing with very acute low back pain. Or let's say I'm dealing with a migraine or something like that. The practice is simply this. It's very simple. And it's why it was kept secret, because the simplicity, people would dismiss it. So you had to do all of these initiations and stuff, and then be told the big secret, and it was like, love others. And you're like, what? So here's the practice. The practice is, when I'm having a migraine, I simply imagine that my migraine is burning up anybody else's migraine in my vicinity. Or when my heart is broken, I imagine, I don't try to increase it. I don't say, let everybody's migraine come on me. There is a practice of that, and it's called Tonglen. We're not talking about that. We're talking about something different. The idea is, I'm already experiencing this pain. May this pain burn up anybody else who's experiencing this pain. Now, the benefit of learning this stage-based approach to meditation is like learning to read. It's learning a skill. Once you have that skill, then you can decide, what do I want to read? I mean, you could read romance novels or sci-fi. What you do with this skill of stability of attention is unlimited. So the other reason the Lojong teachings were kept secret is because you had to first develop stability of attention, go through the stages of meditation. Once you have stability of attention, the world looks radically different. And I propose it's as different as being illiterate and literate. Because when you're illiterate, you don't think that the world looks any different, right? You're like, well, what's learning to read? I remember I was teaching in China, in Shanghai, and I went out to try to get a meal, right? And I'm a vegetarian, and I ended up not eating that night because I couldn't read any menu, And the English menus were like, they were absurd. It was like nonsensical. It was like moss of a moth dipped in, chocolate. I'm like, I don't think that's really what this is, So I just ended up never eating. So being illiterate, like the world is closed off. And so I propose that as soon as you develop stability of attention, the world is as drastically different as being illiterate and becoming literate. And again, it's not essential. You can live a meaningful life, and you can live a spiritually advanced life without that, but it does open things up. Once you have stability of attention and you do this simple prayer practice of, may what's going on for me burn up what might be happening for anybody else, it has a potency that's very profound. I had a beautiful meeting one time in the Himalayas. I was in this tiny village called Zanskar, and it was untouched Tibetan Buddhism. It's part of India, so the Chinese didn't abolish the Buddhism there, and it was just untouched. Anyway, so I had a beautiful meeting trying to explain Christianity to this abbot of this beautiful monastery. And when I talked about Jesus dying on the cross, it was so obvious to him. He's like, oh, he's doing this basic Lojong practice, right? Like Jesus dying for our sins, or that idea. And the Lojong practice is if I have a migraine, may my migraine eliminate your migraine. That's the basic practice. Now, do I really eliminate your migraine? That's a huge debate in the Tibetan monasteries. Anybody ever seen Tibetan debating? It's really fun. It's really active. You go like that, and if I was debating Cecily, she can only say yes, no, doesn't apply. It's like playing chess. And then I'm trying to trap her with logic, right? It's a very kind of masculine thing, but it's super fun. And the idea is two people using this formula of debate can eventually get at the truth. And wrong views will get eradicated. Because of this world of conspiracy theories and misinformation, I've started a Buddhist debate team in my hometown, just to get a group of people trained in clarity of thought. But you would debate, like, oh, so can I get rid of your headache? You know, and it's that idea. It's a fun debate, but we're not going to get into that. But that's beside the point. What you're actually doing is you're training your heart to open even in the midst of pain. And you're starting to be able to use your pain to open your heart. And if pain has meaning, it becomes a very different quality than meaningless pain. Carl Jung said, neurosis is pain that has no meaning. You know? And so really what this whole practice of and I've used it, and it's a very beautiful practice. The idea in the Lojong tradition is to get so good at it that at the moment of death, in Tibetan they say there's a particular pain and there's a particular fear that often comes up at death. It's short-lived, but it does arise. And they say if you can use the Lojong those at that point, it becomes very, very powerful. The fear of dying and the fear of pain, if you can then use that to benefit others, that dying process becomes profoundly meaningful. So really what you're doing is you're training in lesser pains, like a migraine or a low back pain or whatever. You're training in the lesser pains to use it for the more frightening pains. And then one more thing to say about that, the fear is diminished a little bit. I'll come to both your questions in a second, but let me touch on this equation. And this equation is a basic Buddhist equation. Pain times resistance equals suffering. So pain, if you've noticed, it's not optional. We are in bodies that feel, we are going to be experiencing pain. And we're all brothers and sisters in that. We're all siblings, and that we all have to go through a fairly serious level of pain and discomfort, right? But where the suffering comes in is when we have resistance to that pain. And we were talking about that on the break, but it's like if I have something happening, every time my low back goes out, I have a surge of resistance. Oh my God, I have so much to do this week, I cannot be incapacitated. And that resistance, my whole body seizes up and I suffer because that resistance has become so strong. And then what I do over the next week is I work through the resistance and I work to coming into the gifts that pain has to offer, even though it's inconvenient, even though I have to cancel this, and and it's just working through the resistance, and then I can experience the pain just for what it is without the resistance, and my level of suffering drastically decreases. Let me say that one more way, and then we'll move on and come to your questions. But one of my meditation teachers, wonderful teacher, who's passed away now from brain cancer, but he had his intestines blocked, a block of his intestines, and he was in a life-threatening situation. And his wife, thank God for so many of our partners, but his wife was the one that convinced him to go to the emergency room. Because he was just meditating, and he's like, no, it's not a big deal, So he went to the emergency room. And I just saw this yesterday. You know that chart? It's like 1 through 10. Like 1, I feel happy, and it's like 2, I feel slightly uncomfortable, So it's like a level. So the nurse said to him, on a level of 1 to 10, how are you feeling? What's your level of pain? And he looked at the chart and he thought, I'm at like a level 2, right? I'm feeling fine, So he was triaged. He was just sitting in the emergency room for a long time, and then then he looked at the chart and he realized, oh, well, I feel fine, but I'm actually experiencing the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. But what he had is he had no resistance, so he wasn't associated it with suffering. So his suffering level was very, very low. Basically, it was not suffering, and his pain level was the greatest it had ever been in his life. And he's like, oh, she's asking me this. She's not asking me this. So he called the nurse and he said, oh, I'm at a level 10. And she's like, oh my God, okay. So they rushed him in and he almost died. You know, his body was filling up with toxins and he was almost going into a kind of sepsis or something. So that's where he learned about this equation. And that's, the Buddha taught this idea. So really what we're working on with pain is we're working on the resistance because we have no option for this. I mean, some people claim that there's an option for that. I have my doubts. So I just wanted to touch on that. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, and that's the gift of pain when you can get rid of the resistance, you're very present. Yeah, and you realize, and I've realized this, that presence feeds you in a profound way, even when it's uncomfortable. It's more feeding of us than mind wandering. And yeah.
I just wanted to say how that comes up for me.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just around pain. It's when I hear myself saying this shouldn't be happening.
Exactly.
And then luckily, Buddha's teaching is like, oh, this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, really?
Yeah.
And then that equals suffering.
Yeah.
Even if it's not pain, it's just like the weather.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Like, it shouldn't be like this.
It shouldn't be raining because I had plans for a picnic.
Yeah.
All the things that have that sentence. And, triggers for me. I know I've stepped into that place.
Yeah, totally.
And I just wanted to ask you, the sentences around fear, understand, may my pain from my migraine burn out all the pain of other people's heads or bodies. What about my fear of dying?
Exactly, same thing.
May my fear burn out the fear.
It doesn't have to be physical, it can be emotional. May my heart break, may my fear, I'm already feeling it, so may it burn up anybody else's fear here. Yeah. Now the question of does it really do that? I really don't know. I mean, I think it's a little too metaphysical of a statement to say it does, but I will tell you, one time I was having a really bad migraine, and I have a friend who has constant migraines. So all night long, I just was working with him. May he have no migraine, may he have no insomnia, and I hadn't seen him in months, and by total coincidence, I ran into him the next day. I said, hey, how's everything going? He's like, man, I don't know what happened, but I had the best sleep of my life last night. And I very accept that could be coincidence, but I just thought it was so wonderful. It's like, wow, what a coincidence.
And we could imagine Jesus saying the same thing on the cross.
Totally, yeah. And so it's such a...
I sacrifice my love burn.
Right, yeah.
All.
Yeah.